Are you ready? Let's go!
Don't you sometimes just want to talk about everything? You know, there's days when you can just talk about anything. Need to sit back and chat about nothing at all? Nothing But Julie, coming at you with fun and creative topics and interviews.
Did you hear Julie's podcast? She's got the greatest topics.
Come join the chat about everything, anything, and nothing. So unwind and tune in to Nothing But Julie. Great topics and cool interviews with some pretty awesome people. And now, without further delay, here's Nothing But Julie.
Well, hello, everybody. This is Julie Schrager. I am your host of Nothing But Julie podcast, and happy hump day. Happy Wednesday to you all. I wanted to touch on something which is mostly for women, which is more about how we change throughout our lives. And it might sound like a little bit of a boring topic, but it's also going to be fun because I'm probably going to touch on some things that many women have gone through and changed and survived throughout their years. And it's not just mentally, it's also it's women's bodies and how aging is different for women versus men. I know that the male and female bodies, we respond differently to aging. But the psychology with women and men is very, very different as well. And the life expectancy, I know that it's a simple fact that pretty much it throughout the world that women live longer than men. And some think that it's because men might engage in more dangerous activities or dangerous occupations, like the military. But that is not the only reason why there's so much. There's a reason why women live longer. It's also women tend to see a doctor more often than a man, and they can be diagnosed with certain things faster and live longer. And apparently in the United States, the average life expectancy is 78.6 years for all genders. But for women, it's 81. And for men, it's 76. So there you go. I know that when we are younger, we very rarely look into our future. And, what is life going to be like when we're in our 50s, 60s, 70s, and all the wonderful things that start happening with women, such as sexual function, menopause, and vaginal dryness. And what about for men? With many of them suffer from erectile dysfunction. So women are also dealing with hormones. Oh, I am right now. It's not horrible, but I am definitely going through perimenopause. But I think that the mood swings are probably the worst. And the mood swings are there, it just comes on so fast where all of a sudden I'm in a great mood. I'm in a great mood, and all of a sudden, like in the snap of a finger, I am just in a really foul mood. Luckily, it does not last long, and I've gotten a handle on it to where I kind of know what to do to prevent it from getting worse. But our estrogen levels are always changing with aging, and that could be a huge concern. And for men, their testosterone levels are changing. But what about our brains? Our brains start to age. Many people don't think about that unless it's something where a loved one or even yourself is starting to suffer from memory loss or maybe Alzheimer's or dementia. It's just kind of like a twist of fate. So what about brain aging? I mean, men that are not fit, they're overweight or they're diagnosed with diabetes, or they that can affect the age of their brain. And women were actually more likely to suffer from cognitive impairment. So that's why, ladies, it's extremely it's important for women to make sure that they have another life outside of just their husband, because it's important to keep your brain healthy. I had read that 32% of men and 15% of women over 100 fit the profile of what they call escapers, or people who did not have any major health conditions. Isn't that cool? It's important to get health screening. It's important to see your doctor once a year and get blood tests and all that. But what about what to expect with aging? I think that once women turn 50, we have this idea of my body's going to fall apart. And it's true. I know several women that are constantly complaining. As soon as I turn 50, this happens. It's not that. I think that it's just that maybe those things were happening before, but they were few and far between. And I don't like knowing that, because what's happening to me might not happen to you. Have there been, have there been some things that have affected me? Well, of course, some aches and pains, but I try not to focus on it too much and just keep moving through it. I think that it's really important, with your cardio, with your cardiovascular system. I mean, your blood vessels and your arteries start to stiffen, and that makes your heart work harder. And, you need to really keep yourself fit. What about your bones? What about your joints? Well, I do not take calcium because of all of the studies I've read. It's not just about calcium. I actually take magnesium and vitamin D. And I'm physical, and I don't do drugs. I don't drink a lot, blah, 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 blah. But what really happens to us, women more so? I mean, let's talk about the body, and let's talk about what we've gone through as far as, starting like in our 20s. So I know that up until about, let's say age 30, our bones, they get thicker, they gain density. And especially if you exercise regularly and you eat well and you have vitamin D. If you don't, then your body definitely starts to lose a lot of bone density. And your heart needs to, we have more body parts than men, and we have to be really, really careful when it comes to those like breasts. We have to be really careful as women get older, because I feel like because of all the changes in our body, menopause and the lack of estrogen can be really harmful to women versus what men go through. So it's really important that we focus on not only our mental health, but our physical health as well. So, I mean, aside from the body changes, is it true that women get wiser with age? I remember having a discussion with my mother several years ago, and it was about how things don't affect her as much as they used to. And I remember her telling me that as she gets older, things don't affect her as much because of aging. I'm 30 years younger than her, and she's gone through a lot more than me. And so she's been able to deal with the bullshit of other women, other men, the world, society, and gain more armor and become more wiser. And so I figured it was just a matter of time after going through some friendships or relationships or life itself and things happening and difference of opinions, to at some point form a different person inside of me that became more wiser, or not caring about other things as much as I did before, or not being affected and not sweating the small stuff, I think that it's definitely evolved. I've definitely evolved as I've gotten older to where I really do not care about some of the things that I cared about before. I think that years ago I might have been affected by smaller things than other things that were bigger. And it was actually the smaller things that affected me more than the bigger ones. And so now I just don't care. And I don't like the phoniness of people. I actually don't give in to those that are phony anymore. If I wind up having a conversation with someone that I have zero respect for or don't want to have anything to do with, I don't care anymore about how I might behave or how I might act when I've been hurt by that particular person or been written off as a friend or whatever it is. I don't owe that person any respect, and I don't care anymore about what people feel or think about me. It doesn't affect me anymore. And so luckily for me, I've had a man in my life for a very long time that grounds me, and he is so unaffected by things that sometimes it really pisses me off, because I'm like, I've gotten to the point where how can you not be affected? Like, are you even human? And it's so annoying, because at first it was more like, okay, well, that's great that you're not affected by this. Oh, that's great, you're not affected by that. But almost 30 years later, he's still unaffected. And I start questioning, like, is this a good thing? Or does he just have, like, no feelings? Does he not care? Well, I know he's caring, and I know he has feelings. He just doesn't give in to the bullshit. He never has. And he just, things kind of fall off his shoulders. And so it's been interesting watching him and me together growing up, where I am totally the opposite, and trying to learn a little bit more about how to not care like he does. And it's taken a really long time, because I'm a woman and I do care. But as far as other things go, when I was in my 20s, when we were in our 20s, we did not care about the future. What did we care about? We cared about, as a woman, we cared about, what our place in life was going to be, our role in life. We cared about friendships. We cared about having sex and maybe finding a man in our lives and eventually getting married. Some of us. Some of us cared about, finding what we were going to do for the rest of our lives, because those of you that are my age, it was always about, what are you going to do outside of high school? What are you going to do? You need to have a career, and you needed to kind of know what you were doing. Whereas now, no. Now, today, it's not about what it is that you're going to do in your life. It's about finding happiness in what you do. Whereas when I was younger, it was about, it doesn't matter if you're happy in your job. You just need to make money. In my 20s, I was very carefree. I was still growing mentally and physically, and everything bothered me. Every single thing bothered me, because I was young and I wasn't forthright, and I didn't know how to handle certain situations, so I was very reactive. Then I would say, as I got older and I had my son, I became less reactive. I had to, because not only was he watching how I was behaving, which I knew I had to change a bit to make him become the man he needs to be, but there were so many different situations when he was younger that could have caused me to, want to hurt somebody. And I needed to take some time and be less reactive. And that was a great, great lesson. I don't know if I would have been able to get a handle on being so reactive at a young age. It might have happened a little bit later if I didn't have my son. For example, if something went wrong at school, at first I would be very reactive and be like, how could you let this happen at the school? To becoming, if my son told me something that was upsetting to him, instead of getting very upset and very angry, I would take about 24 hours to let it sink in without thinking a lot about it. It was there, but I knew that my irrational state, because I was so angry, it would not have allowed me to think clearly. So I knew that I had to take some time to just not react so quickly. And that was actually a great lesson, and it made me who I am today, because today I will hear something and I don't need 24 hours, but the way I react is so much different than how it was. It's much more rational, versus needing the 24 hours or a few hours. Now I'm able to kind of assess what's going on quickly without needing extra time. So I'm much more rational within a short period of time. And so in my 30s, I definitely was calmer when it came to things about my son, but I was still learning. As your children get older, it's a learning process for you, because as they get older each year, they're changing. So you have to change. So not only do you have to change as a woman, as a human, but you're also learning how to deal with certain situations as your child gets older. My 30s were all about my son and working. I was working only during my son's time in school. So I was able to bring him to school. I was able to pick him up from school. I don't think he even knew that I was working. So we had a really great relationship. We still do. And it was all about, when he came home, what sports events did he have? Where did he have to be? Where did he have to go? How much homework did he have? Did he have to study for tests? Was he sick? Is he going to a friend's house, or is his friend coming to our house? What am I making for dinner? It was all about him and the family. And that is what kept me busy throughout my 30s. And as far as life in my 30s, I definitely enjoyed making friends and then losing some of those friends. And I don't mean by death, I just mean things just kind of withered. That is the one thing I remember in my 30s, how many friends came and went. And I'm still trying to figure this out today. And of course I went through the whole, oh my God, is it me? Because, it wasn't so many friends, but it was a few that, just, I was trying to figure it out. It seemed as though many of these women and even men cared more about the amount of people they had as friends and being diversified, as well as forming these groups, these cliques, these squads that, excuse me, mid-podcast sneeze. It was all about how many friends they could have, and within that amount of friends, finding the perfect clique to go out with every weekend, and getting dressed to the nines every weekend. And it became a thing in where I live that, you almost had to be a part of a group of women to really have friendships. And that just was not my thing. I do not like hanging out with the same people day in and day out. And I certainly do not like the rules of this is our group. We can't let anyone else in. That is a disgusting way to live. And so I think that that has to do with why I kind of ended a lot of relationships, because it either became monotonous, hanging out with the same people, or our views were different, or they all just wanted to have just a small group. And it was just like, no. And I remember there was a time, or if not a few times, when I said, oh, I'm going to invite my friend so-and-so, and they would say, wait, who's that? And they would question it. I'm like, who cares? Like, you'll really like her. She's a lot of fun. But no, she's not a part of our clique. So that was a huge factor in my 30s, that I had noticed this trend and the constant getting together of the same people over and over. And I'm very free-willed. I'm more like the more the merrier. More people you can have, the better. Certainly I had friends that I would hang out with and go out with, and I was friends with just them. But for the most part, it was a big trend. And then I turned 40. And I remember at this point, my son was 13, and he was, 13. How old? So you're in kindergarten, 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8. So yeah, sorry, I had to do my counting. He was entering high school. And it was a whole new world, a whole new, and you got the puberty and everything going on. And I'm now in my 40s, well, just turning 40. And my 40s became more about not being as sensitive as I was, not caring as much as I used to care about the smaller things, and caring about the bigger things. Whereas up until my 40s, it was more about caring about the smaller things and the bigger things. And, sometimes life shocks you and makes you think about reassessing your life. So in my 40s, I did not care about how many friends I had, or it was more about the quality, not the quantity. And my life had become more about me, and caring about me and the things that are important to me. My son still had 4 years left of school, but it became, he was older, and so he was much more independent. My husband and I, were able to establish some nice friendships and relationships with other people. But I didn't feel like I had to see them every weekend, nor did I feel that I had to always go out every weekend. What I did notice as far as a trend was how women in their 40s who now had children that were in high school, it almost seemed like they were shouting out, "This is my time." Many women in the area that I live in who were part of these cliques would behave as though they were still in their 20s. The clothes that they wear, the low-cut clothes, and their boobs hanging out, and they were so tight, and they had to pose for pictures in the right way, had to make sure that, oh wait, I have to turn to the side, and then I have to turn my top torso a little towards the left, make sure that my head is down, and I have my hand on my hip, and I have the perfect smile. Meanwhile, I would hear from other people how unhappy they are, or the constant talking behind their other friends in the cliques, backs. And it was just the most phony thing. And I felt like, all right, look, I kind of get this in a way. Many women had kids in their 20s or mid 20s, and they're all coming out now and living the lives that they didn't get to live in their 20s or their 30s. But here's the thing. You're in your 40s. You do have to act a certain way and dress a certain way. I'm certainly not telling you to, act frigid or to act like the Queen of England with a stick up your ass or dress a certain way and cover things up. What I'm saying is when people see you when you're in your 40s, you can still dress sexy, but in like a sexy, chic, classy way. You don't have to have your boobs sticking out, and you don't have to adhere to what everyone else is doing. Be that person that just smiles in a picture instead of having to take 10 minutes to pose and have the light the right way and the angle the correct way. It was all about what they look like and how much they can post on social media, and it became ridiculous. And I really did at the time get some great ideas on social media, but it became like really annoying. And I'll tell you right now, I like to dress up. I like to wear makeup on occasion, but it was extreme. It was going out every weekend. It was birthday parties, and I'm just more of like, that's not important to me. And other things in my 40s, things did not affect me nearly as much as they used to. There were some things that definitely upset me more than others. And I felt like I was still living the life of a 20-year-old to where I had to, still deal with infantile things. However, on the flip side, I also became a lot more patient. I was really counting down the day before I turned 50 because I was kind of hoping that I wasn't dealing with the same bullshit that I was dealing with as I was, when I was younger. I know of people who live in communities that are in their 60s, 70s, 80s, women who are still talking about other women or gossiping. And I'm just like, what is wrong with you? Like, why do you care so much? Why do these things bother you? And I got this disgust for these women who were in their 70s and 80s still talking and behind people's backs. And I thought to myself, this is not for me. And this is not what I ever want to be. I don't want to be a part of a group of women that are constantly gossiping and talking. It is not something that I like to do. Look, talking about something that might have happened in a community is one thing because it affected all of us. But to be deliberately talking about someone in a mean way is just not my style. I then turned 50 and felt like a breath of fresh air. And I was doing a lot of reading about women and what happens to our bodies, what happens to our brains, how we start to act. And I've got to tell you, it made me feel so good because I felt like I could yell from the rooftops that I am 50 years old and I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit about this. I don't give a shit about that. I don't give a shit about you. And I can very matter-of-factly act in the way I want to. Now, I'm 50 and I'm talking to a 30-something-year-old woman who doesn't understand how I can just simply say, no, thank you, to something, or I'd rather not. And it's because you have to remember that when you were 30, you didn't act like a woman in their 50s, where you can very matter-of-factly say things now without feeling uncomfortable or regret. And so when you're dealing with younger women, even younger men, they might say, "Ugh, she's such a bitch," or "she's so mean," or "she just simply said no thank you." Yeah, that's right. I did. But the fact that it bothers people, well, I think it might. I don't really know. when you're dealing with people that haven't reached the precipice that you've reached, you are entering dangerous territory because they just don't understand why you are behaving the way you're behaving, versus being friends with an older person who has reached that precipice, that can understand and respect when you answer someone in a specific way. They might say, oh, I need to act that way. But good luck, because women are women, and women can be very catty. And I, although am a woman, I am also a tomboy. And I don't care about half of the things that most women care about. I have learned to enjoy my own company, enjoy the people that I have chosen to be in my life. I have learned to enjoy the quality and not the quantity, and have learned to break free from just the bullshit. And I've got to tell you, it's extremely freeing. Now, am I 100% like that? No. Did things still piss me off and affect me? Yeah. However, I have much more of a handle on it. I don't obsess about the things as much as I did. And why? Because I've been through it. Been through it so much that I've reached this point where I just kind of know how to handle it. And won't allow myself to feel the feelings I used to have when I was younger now, because I just didn't like how I felt. As far as the body goes, it's different for everyone. I think that if you take care of yourself as best you can, and there are still some things that are just going to start affecting you physically, then that's just how it is. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's age. It could just mean that there's, something that it's affecting you. I try very hard not to focus on all the oys that I make and the bending down sometimes, and because I know that right now I am in much better shape than I will be tomorrow, than I will be a year from now or 10 years from now. So I'm keeping everything at bay. But it is true that as you get older, especially women, we start to lose our estrogen, and we really have to eat well, care for our bodies, and exercise. Be active. Even if you don't want to exercise, go for a walk every day. It's very important. So that's pretty much it for me. I think that it's a wonderful thing getting older. I don't love it, but I will, I'm trying to find the adjective. I will embrace it, and I will try my hardest not to look back and be happy with where I am and what I am, because as women, we always find something that's wrong with us. And I can find a plethora of things I don't like, but do I really want to change them? Nah, not really. I might just deal with them for the rest of my life. But the point is, I am happy in my skin right now. I am happy with who I've become. I'm happy with what I've gone through in my life. I wish that there were some things I didn't go through and I didn't allow myself to be put through. But with age comes wisdom, and I am definitely wiser with some things. And in another year or two, I'll be even more wiser with other things that might happen to me today. Well, thanks so much for joining me, everybody. I hope you really like this podcast. If you do, feel free to subscribe, which you might be, and leave me a review. And feel free to go to my social media accounts on Facebook and on Instagram, Nothing But Julie. And feel free to go to my WordPress blog. I'm at nothingbutjulie.wordpress.com. If you want to find links to all of this, you can go onto my Instagram account and click on the link in the bio. Have a great rest of your week.